The Battle of the Hydaspes. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great faced his most psychologically demanding military challenge not in Persia or Egypt, but on the banks of a swollen river in what is now Pakistan, against a king named Porus, who had arranged 200 war elephants along his front line. Alexander had never encountered elephants at this scale. His cavalry horses, which had carried him to every victory from Greece to Central Asia, were terrified of the animals and refused to approach them. Porus knew this and had designed his entire formation around it. The elephants stood like a living wall between the river crossing and the Indian infantry behind them. What followed was one of the most carefully adapted battles in ancient history. Alexander crossed the river at night several miles upstream with a portion of his cavalry, and rather than charging the elephant line directly, he ordered his infantry to advance slowly and his cavalry to operate on the flanks, drawing the elephants into turning and shifting ground. His infantry were instructed to hack at the elephants' feet and trunks with axes when they closed in. Brutal, dangerous work at close range. The animals began to panic. When a war elephant panics, it does not stand still. It turns and runs, and it runs through whatever is nearest to it. Porus's own infantry, positioned behind the elephants, were trampled by their own weapons as the line collapsed inward. Alexander won. Porus, wounded, was captured. And in a decision that became one of the most discussed moments of his campaign, Alexander released him, restored his kingdom, and named a city after his horse, who had died during the battle, in the place where he had fought elephants for the first time and found a way through them. The Battle of Heraclea. In 280 BC, the army of the Roman Republic faced war elephants for the first time in their history, and what happened to them that day fundamentally shaped the Roman military's approach to elephant warfare for the next 2 centuries. The elephants belonged to Pyrrhus, king of Epirus in northwestern Greece, who had brought 20 of them across the Adriatic to southern Italy at the invitation of the Greek city of Tarentum, which was in conflict with Rome. The 2 armies met near the city of Heraclea in a battle that the Romans were, by most accounts, winning on equal terms, their discipline and formation holding against the Epirote infantry through multiple engagements. Then Pyrrhus released the elephants onto the Roman flanks. The Roman horses reacted the way horses consistently reacted to war elephants in the ancient world. They panicked, threw their riders, and fled. The infantry units that the cavalry had been protecting were suddenly exposed, and the psychological effect of the elephants on foot soldiers who had never seen the animals before was severe enough that the Roman line broke. Pyrrhus won the battle, but absorbed casualties he had not expected. His comment afterward, that another victory like this one would destroy him before he reached Rome, gave the English language the term Pyrrhic victory, a phrase still in common use today. The elephants at Heraclea had won him a battle and given him a warning he chose not to fully hear. The Battle of Raphia. In 217 BC, 2 of the largest elephant forces ever assembled by rival powers met in a single engagement near the town of Raphia on the border between modern Israel and Egypt, and the outcome turned almost entirely on the difference between 2 kinds of elephant. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire had brought 102 Indian elephants, larger and more experienced in battle than their African counterparts. Ptolemy IV of Egypt had assembled 73 African forest elephants, a smaller subspecies than the savanna elephant, distinct from the African elephants used by other powers and generally smaller than the Indian animals. When the 2 elephant lines met on the flanks of the battlefield, the Ptolemaic elephants were reportedly overwhelmed by the size and aggression of the Indian animals and fell back, taking parts of Ptolemy's line with them. But the battle was saved not by the elephants, but by infantry. Ptolemy himself rode among his troops on the weakened flank, and a phalanx of native Egyptian soldiers, fighting in a war for the first time in centuries, held the center and eventually broke the Seleucid line. Antiochus won the elephant contest. Ptolemy won the battle. The peace that followed ended the Fourth Syrian War and held for years. Raphia is one of the rare ancient battles in which the largest deployment of war elephants in history produced an elephant engagement that determined almost nothing, and it is the human soldiers around them who decided the day. The Battle of Zama. In 202 BC, Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who had crossed the Alps with 37 elephants 15 years earlier and terrorized Rome for over a decade, faced the Roman general Scipio Africanus near the town of Zama in North Africa with 80 war elephants at the front of his line. Hannibal's army was a mixture of veterans, new recruits, and mercenaries of varying quality, and the elephants were his most reliable opening weapon. Scipio had been preparing for this moment for years. He had watched what Hannibal did with elephants across Italy, and he had developed a specific formation to neutralize them. His infantry maniples were arranged not in continuous lines, but in columns with deliberately open lanes running straight from the front of the Roman formation to the rear. When Hannibal released the elephants, Scipio's soldiers did something counterintuitive. They made noise. Trumpets, shouting, clashing metal. Panicked by the sound, some elephants turned sideways immediately and ran into Hannibal's own cavalry on the wings, disrupting his flanks before the main engagement began. Others ran straight down Scipio's open lanes and passed through the Roman formation, doing minimal damage, emerging harmlessly behind the Roman rear where they were dealt with separately. The elephants neutralized before the main engagement began. Hannibal's infantry faced a Roman cavalry that was free to operate on the flanks. Carthage lost. Hannibal fled. The Battle of Zama ended the Second Punic War, reduced Carthage to a subordinate state, and established Rome as the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. And it was decided in part by a Roman commander who had specifically planned for 80 elephants and had a lane ready for each one. The Battle of Ipsus. In 301 BC, the largest deployment of war elephants in a single battle up to that point in history occurred not between empires at their peaks, but between the successors of Alexander the Great, fighting over the fragments of his kingdom 22 years after his death. The battle at Ipsus in what is now central Turkey brought together 4 of the surviving Diadochi Alexander's former generals in shifting alliances, and the winning coalition under Seleucus and Lysimachus fielded 480 elephants against Antigonus and his son Demetrius, who had none. Antigonus's cavalry, commanded by Demetrius, broke through the opposing cavalry on one wing and pursued them from the field. It was a standard cavalry success, but it removed Demetrius and his cavalry from the battle entirely, and when he tried to return to support the main engagement, he found 480 elephants had been repositioned to block his path back to his father's infantry. The elephant screen did not need to charge Demetrius. It simply stood there. With his cavalry gone and unable to return, Antigonus's infantry was surrounded and cut apart. Antigonus himself was killed in the fighting, struck by multiple javelins at the age of 81. He was one of the last people with a living memory of Alexander's complete army, and he died at Ipsus in a battle shaped by the very weapon his former commander had captured and used before him. The Battle of Trebia. In 218 BC, Hannibal's crossing of the Alps with 37 elephants is usually the part of his story that captures attention, the sheer improbability of moving that many enormous animals over mountain passes in winter. But what happened at the Trebia River in northern Italy in December of that year is the episode that shows what he actually did with them once they arrived. The Roman army under Sempronius Longus crossed a freezing river at dawn to engage Hannibal's forces, urged into action by a Carthaginian feint attack designed to pull them across the water before they had eaten or properly prepared. By the time the Romans had waded through the Trebia in December cold and formed their line, they were already physically diminished. Hannibal placed his elephants on the extreme flanks of his formation. The cold had already weakened the animals, Several would die in the following weeks from the conditions, but on the day of battle, they were functional enough to perform their primary task, terrifying the Roman allied cavalry on the wings into routing. With the Roman cavalry gone from both flanks, the Carthaginian cavalry enveloped the Roman infantry from the sides and rear. The Romans lost somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 men at the Trebia. The elephants did not win the battle alone, but they collapsed the flank protection that would have kept the Roman infantry from being surrounded, and the battle's outcome followed directly from that collapse. Of the 37 elephants that crossed the Alps, only one survived the Italian campaign's first winter. The Battle of Thapsus. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar faced a Pompeian army in North Africa under Metellus Scipio that included 64 war elephants, and Caesar's response revealed something that military commanders had been slowly learning for 2 centuries, that with preparation, war elephants could be turned from a decisive weapon into a manageable problem and even a liability for the side deploying them. Caesar had acquired and trained a number of elephants himself in the preceding period specifically to familiarize his legions with the animals, reducing the fear response that made untested troops vulnerable to them. He positioned his most experienced and personally steady veterans, the 5th Legion, on the right flank specifically to face the Pompeian elephant line. When the battle began, the sequence of events unraveled quickly for Scipio. The Caesarian veterans used slings, javelins, and targeted noise to panic the enemy elephants almost immediately. The animals turned back on their own side, and the Pompeian infantry and cavalry were thrown into disorder by their own weapons. Caesar's legions advanced rapidly through the chaos. Scipio's force collapsed into a rout. What followed was one of the most complete battlefield victories of the entire period. Thapsus demonstrated something the ancient world had needed 200 years and dozens of engagements to establish clearly. The war elephant was not an unconquerable weapon. It was a weapon with a specific and exploitable failure mode, and a sufficiently prepared enemy could make that failure mode the central feature of the battle. The Battle of Panipat. In 1526, an army from Central Asia under the founder of what would become the Mughal Empire met the Delhi Sultanate's forces on a plain north of Delhi, and the battle that decided the future of northern India became one of the most asymmetric weapons contests in the history of elephant warfare. Ibrahim Lodi, the Sultan, fielded an army that included war elephants in substantial numbers, a traditional and historically dominant element of military power across the subcontinent for over 1,000 years. Babur, his opponent, had no elephants. What Babur had was artillery gunpowder cannon and matchlock firearms, relatively new in the region, effective at range, and extraordinarily loud. The Delhi elephants, faced with cannon fire and musket discharge, panicked in exactly the manner that ancient elephants had panicked when faced with trumpets and sudden noise, but far more severely. The unpredictability and volume of gunpowder weapons produced a mass disruption of the elephant line that no amount of training or experience had prepared the animals or their mahouts for. Ibrahim Lodi was killed in the battle, along with approximately 15,000 of his soldiers. Babur's victory at Panipat was rapid, total, and transformative. It ended the Lodi Sultanate, established the Mughal presence in India, and demonstrated that the war elephant, which had dominated South Asian warfare for centuries, had met a technology to which it had no adaptive response. Mughal armies afterward used both cannons and elephants together, but Panipat marked the moment when the calculation changed permanently. Timur's Battle of Delhi. In 1398, Timur, the Central Asian conqueror known in the West as Tamerlane, faced the army of the Delhi Sultanate near Delhi itself, and the problem that confronted him was one that had no clean historical solution available in his military tradition. Over 100 Indian war elephants, armored, equipped with swords strapped to their tusks, and positioned at the front of an enemy line specifically to break his cavalry before the infantry engaged. Timur's response was unusual enough to have been recorded in detail by his own court historians. He ordered his men to gather large quantities of dry grass and wood, pile them onto camels, and drive those camels forward toward the elephant line when the battle began. The grass and wood were set alight. The burning camels, terrified and in pain, ran toward the elephants at speed. The elephants, confronted with fire, noise, and the smell of burning animal, panicked, not all of them, and not immediately, but enough to break the coherence of the Sultanate's advance. Timur's cavalry moved in around the disrupted elephant line while his infantry engaged the gaps. The Sultanate's army fell apart. Delhi was taken. The city was sacked so thoroughly in the days that followed that contemporary accounts described it as effectively uninhabited for months afterward, and the population and economic infrastructure of the region took generations to recover. The battle itself lasted a day. The improvised solution Timur developed for the elephant problem, burning camels as incendiary panic weapons, is one of the more vivid and desperate tactical improvisations in the recorded history of warfare, and it worked. The Battle of Asculum. In 279 BC, a year after the Battle of Heraclea had shown Rome what Pyrrhus and his elephants were capable of, the two forces met again at Asculum in southern Italy for 2 days of fighting that produced one of the most complex and contested ancient battle narratives in the historical record. On the first day, Pyrrhus's elephants were unusable. The terrain was wooded and broken, and the animals could not operate effectively on that ground. The Roman legions, fighting in terrain that neutralized Pyrrhus's most powerful advantage, held their own against the Epirot infantry and reportedly inflicted significant casualties. Pyrrhus himself was wounded by a javelin throw during the fighting. On the second day, the battle moved to open ground, and the elephants were released in their intended role on the flanks. The Roman cavalry, as at Heraclea, was driven back by the animals. The legions, without flank protection, were pressured from the sides, and the Romans eventually withdrew from the field, giving Pyrrhus a technical victory in that he held the ground at the end of the day. But the losses he suffered across both days were again severe. Roman innovation was already appearing. The sources mention Roman anti-elephant vehicles, wheeled platforms fitted with spikes and grapples, used at Asculum with partial effectiveness in the first recorded attempt at a purpose-built counter-elephant weapon. Whether these machines worked meaningfully is disputed in the historical record. What is not disputed is that Rome returned from Asculum already working on the problem, while Pyrrhus's capacity to replace his losses was running out. Your voice shapes this channel. Join the Telegram linked in the description. And if you're not ready to stop exploring, click right here for another journey you won't want to miss.